The rain had been falling since noon, the heavy, sullen kind that turns country roads to mud and strips what remains of October from the trees. The Duke's carriage came to a stop at the end of the lane, and he stepped out without waiting for anyone to offer a hand. He had not sent word ahead. He had not, in fact, intended to come at all. The house was supposed to be empty, but there was a light burning in the hall.
Stay here.
He went to the front door alone, tried the handle, unlocked. He stepped inside, water dripping from the brim of his hat, boots loud on the flagstone, and heard a voice from somewhere near the fire.
Who is there?
She came to the library doorway before he could answer. A woman in her mid-20s, dark-haired and pale, and unmistakably with child. One hand rested low over her belly, the other gripped the door frame as if it were the only steady thing in the room. They looked at each other across the hallway.
You are in the wrong house.
I was given the key to this house.
By whom?
My late husband.
Your husband had no business with this house.
He said you gave him use of it. 2 winters ago, when he managed the survey of your eastern fields, he kept the key. He gave it to me at the very end, the last thing he said that made any practical sense.
The Duke went very still. Not from surprise, he had learned long ago not to wear surprise openly, but from the particular calculation of a man who has just realized the evening will be considerably more complicated than he planned. He remembered the survey, he remembered Vale. He had not thought to ask for the key back. Outside, rain drove against the windows. Inside, neither of them moved.
Your husband is dead.
Yes.
And his name?
Thomas Vale, though I suspect you already know it.
He did. That name arrived in his chest, the way a stone falls into still water, not with a splash, but with a slow, spreading weight. Thomas Vale. 5 months ago, £500. A handshake in a gentleman's study that had since proved worth rather less than the room it was given in.
Mrs. Vale.
That would be me. And you, I presume, are the Duke.
I am.
Then I have been dreading this particular moment for approximately 3 months.
She said it with the composure of someone who has already used up her panic and is operating now on something grimmer and more useful. He found himself, despite the hour and the rain, and the general inconvenience of the situation, paying close attention.
There is a letter. I take it. Your husband was fond of letters.
There is. If I produce it, will you send me out into the rain?
That depends on what is in it.
Then I suppose we find out together.
A composed answer from a desperate woman. He had heard worse. He had deserved worse. He held out his hand without comment, and she crossed the hall and placed the sealed envelope into it, as if setting down something she had been carrying too long and was glad to be rid of. The Duke broke the wax. Read the letter once, then read the first lines again, more carefully. He set it down on the hall table.
Your husband borrowed money from me.
I know.
He promised repayment. He left London instead.
I know that too.
And you came here.
I had nowhere else to go. My brother-in-law will not have me. The vicar will not speak for me. Every house that smiled at me last winter has its door closed now. She looked at him steadily, not away. I am 8 months with child. I have 11 shillings to my name, and the nearest town is 6 miles through rain. If you mean to send me away, I will go, but I thought you should see the full picture before you decided.
There are moments when a person shows you exactly who they are, not through charm or clever words, but through the bare fact of still standing. He looked at her for a long moment.
Sit down.
I am not a child.
No, you are a woman who has been on her feet since dawn in wet boots. Sit down.
She sat, not because he told her to, but because her feet had been at the edge of mutiny for the last 2 hours, and she was done pretending otherwise. He rang the bell. When the housekeeper arrived, candle in hand, stiff with confusion and curiosity, the Duke gave instructions with the same calm he might have used for ordering firewood. A room prepared, hot water brought up, something warm from the kitchen. No explanations tonight. The housekeeper looked at Eleanor, looked at her condition, looked at the Duke. He did not explain further. She went.
I want you to understand that I did not plan this.
I know.
I had no reasonable alternative.
I know that too.
Then why?
Because I want the matter resolved properly. And because sending you out into that road would settle nothing except my conscience. And I have learned not to put too much trust in that.
It was not kindness, precisely. But it was honest, and she had been managed and lied to with such consistency recently that honesty felt like a window opened in a shut room. She looked down at her hands.
Thomas owed you a great deal.
Yes!
Did you know him well?
Well enough to lend him the money. Not well enough to know what he meant to do with it.
That is the grief of trusting the wrong person. You do not discover the mistake until it is too late to unmake it. The Duke knew this. Eleanor Vale knew this. They had simply arrived at the same conclusion by different roads, his shorter, hers considerably more expensive. Before we go further, drop a comment. Where are you listening from right now? And what time is it there? That small gesture helps this channel more than you know. I read every one. The first meal they shared was a strange, careful thing. He sat across from her in the library, the fire between them, and neither of them pretended the arrangement was comfortable. She ate slowly. He watched the storm. The silence was not empty, it was full. The way silences are when two people are thinking harder than they are speaking. At one point she pressed her hand to her side and inhaled sharply.
Pain?
Only a child with poor timing.
He announces himself often.
Constantly. I have begun to assume he has opinions about most things.
The corner of the Duke's mouth moved, almost a smile. She saw it and looked away quickly, the way you avert your eyes from something you are not yet certain you are allowed to want. He asked about her journey north. She answered carefully at first, then with more honesty than she had intended, how she had been passed from one cold house to the next, how Thomas's creditors had appeared before Thomas's body was cold, how the polite world had a very short patience for a widow without income and a great deal of someone else's debt. He listened, did not interrupt, did not offer the soft, useless noises of false sympathy. That alone changed the shape of him in her mind.
Why did you come back tonight? You said you hadn't planned to.
I hadn't.
Then why?
He was quiet for a moment. Outside, rain ran hard down the glass.
Because this was the one place left that no one had yet ruined.
She understood that better than he might have expected. She did not press further. He did not explain further. And in that particular restraint, two people choosing at the same moment, not to take more than was offered, something shifted that had nothing to do with the fire, or the storm, or the hour. The housekeeper showed her to a room at 10:30. The Duke returned to his study, or tried to. He stood at the window for a long time, letter in hand, watching the water run off the stone sill, and thought about a woman who had arrived at his door with 11 shillings and more composure than most men he had met in Parliament. He was still awake when the knock came at 2 in the morning. A messenger at the front door soaked through, apologetic, bearing a second letter marked urgent, sealed with the crest of his solicitor. He read it standing in the hall. Read it a second time. Then he stood without moving for quite some time, and the expression on his face was the particular kind that belongs to a man who has just learned the situation is worse than he knew, and who is, despite all logic, deciding that this changes nothing about what he intends to do. He went upstairs. He did not disturb her room. He stood outside her door for one moment, in the dark, listening to the rain. Then he went to his own room and did not sleep. Morning came gray and quiet. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the grounds waterlogged and the air cold and clean. Eleanor came downstairs to find the housekeeper at the kitchen fire and a pot of tea waiting without being asked for, one small kindness in a season of very few. She was on her second cup when he appeared in the doorway, still in yesterday's coat, or perhaps a different one, boots still damp from the fields.
You slept?
Eventually, the room was very quiet.
Is that a complaint?
It is the opposite of one.
He poured himself coffee and stood by the window watching the mist lift off the lawn. Something about the angle of the light made him look less formidable than the evening before, or perhaps she was simply tired enough that her fear had finally run out of fuel.
Tell me honestly, did you sleep?
Some.
That is a diplomatic answer.
It is the most accurate one I can offer.
She studied him for a moment. the line of his jaw, the paper on the table he had not yet touched, the fact that he was here, in the kitchen, before the household had properly woken, with no reason she could name, except that he had chosen to be.
I want to ask you something. About Vale.
What do you want to know?
How long had you known about the debts?
Since the week after he died, his solicitor appeared at the house with a ledger and an expression that told me everything before he opened his mouth. She set down her cup. I had known something was wrong for longer than that. Thomas went to London in April and came back a different man. Quieter, careful in a way he hadn't been before. I thought it was trouble at work. I did not think it was this.
Did he tell you anything before he died?
He told me the house would see me through. He meant this house, I think this key. He had used it before, years ago, and kept it.
The Duke was quiet for a moment. Outside, a bird called once and fell silent again.
He was not a bad man.
No, he was a weak one, which is a different thing, and in some ways harder to forgive.
He looked at her then, and she saw in his face that he understood exactly what she meant, not with sympathy, which costs nothing, but with recognition, which costs rather more. They finished their coffee in silence, and when the housekeeper returned to clear the table, their hands met briefly over the same cup, neither of them reaching for it on purpose, both of them leaving it a moment too long before stepping back. The housekeeper noticed, said nothing, left. That was how it often began, not with a declaration. With a cup and a moment, and two people pretending they had not just made each other's acquaintance in a way that had nothing to do with debt or weather. Eleanor found him again later in the morning room, coat half on, papers spread across the desk, the expression of a man who had been at work since before it was decent.
You mean to send me away?
I mean to settle this before the world does it for us.
And if it cannot be settled?
Then I will handle it my own way.
She crossed the room and looked at the papers he had not moved to hide. A practical woman, he had noticed that from the first hour, no hysteria, no pretense, no appeal to sentiment. Just the facts of the situation examined without flinching.
What does it say?
That your husband's debts are more complicated than the letter he gave you.
Tell me, all of it.
He told her plainly, the way she had asked. Thomas Vale had not merely borrowed money from him. He had used the Duke's name without permission, without knowledge, to secure a second loan from a private creditor, a loan he had never intended to repay, one that had been secured, fraudulently, against the estate she was standing in. The room went very quiet.
He used your name.
Yes.
And the debt, if it is enforced,
Could be used to claim this property, yes.
She put one hand to the edge of the desk, not to steady herself, more the way a person grips something solid when the floor has shifted beneath them.
then I have come here with nothing and made everything worse. If the estate is seized, you lose your house and I lose the only shelter I have.
You did not make anything. Vale made it. You simply inherited the consequences, which is a different crime and not one of your own making.
You are very calm about this.
I am. The alternative is to be loud about it, and that has never once resolved a debt.
Despite herself, she laughed short and unexpected and real. Then she pressed her lips together and looked away, as if she had not meant to give him that. He noticed. He said nothing about it.
Why are you helping me? Honestly.
He considered the question properly, the way he did most things without rushing to fill the silence.
Because your child should not come into the world carrying his father's dishonesty on his back.
That is a generous answer.
It is an honest one. There may be more. I have not yet decided what to do with the rest of it.
She looked at him then, really looked, the way you look at a person when you stop seeing what you expected and begin seeing what is actually there. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the tension in his jaw that was not coldness, but something older and more private. The fact that he was still here, on the second day, when leaving would have been so much simpler. They walked to the gardens that afternoon because she needed air and he was, though he would not have said it this way, not yet willing to leave her to her thoughts. The rose arbor still held a few last blooms, stubborn against the October cold. Their breath made small clouds in the air between them.
Tell me something about this house, before all this.
It belonged to my mother. She preferred it to London.
Did she?
She said London was for ambition and the country was for the rest of being human.
She sounds like someone worth knowing.
She was.
He said it simply and left it there, the way people do when the loss is old and not something they perform for company. She did not press further. She understood, better than she might have a year ago, that grief has its own dignity, the kind that does not want to be handled.
Why keep me here? If the debt could complicate everything for you.
Because ruin has many forms, and not all of them are worth avoiding.
She stopped walking. The smell of damp earth and late roses was very clear. He stopped a half step ahead and turned back. Their eyes met, and both of them understood that they had arrived, without quite intending to, somewhere that required more honesty than either had planned to give today. He was the one who looked away first, which surprised them both.
You are a difficult man to read.
Yes, I have been told.
I do not mean it as a complaint.
He looked at her again, and that small correction, "I do not mean it as a complaint," sat between them for the rest of the walk, doing quiet damage to the considerable distance they had both been trying to maintain. That night, the storm returned. Fiercer this time, rain against the glass hard enough to wake her from a shallow sleep, thunder rolling in so close she felt it in the walls. She lay still for a moment and tried to breathe through it. Then the pain came, sharp, insistent, impossible to talk herself out of. She knew what it was at once. She made it into the corridor before her knees expressed their opinions. She caught the wall, breathed, waited. The door at the far end of the hall opened. He was already awake, candle in hand, fully dressed, as if he had not slept or had not tried. He saw her and crossed the corridor without hesitating.
The baby?
Yes.
How close?
I don't know. Too early. Much too early.
He did not panic. Whatever else might be said about him, he did not panic. He got his arm around her, got her to the parlor fire, and woke the household with the measured authority of a man who considers noise a last resort. The midwife was 6 miles away, and the roads were flooded. The housekeeper said so, face gone pale.
Then we manage without her.
It is one thing to make a calm decision in daylight. It is another thing entirely to hold that decision through 3 hours of a difficult night. Rain at the windows, a woman in pain who keeps insisting she is fine when she very clearly is not, and nothing to be done but stay and be useful in whatever small ways are available. He brought water. He brought an extra blanket from the room upstairs. He sent the housekeeper for what she knew and stayed for what he did not, which is simply to say, he stayed. At one point past midnight, she told him to leave.
You should not be here. This is not something you need to witness.
I know.
Then go.
No.
I am not your responsibility.
You are at the moment my only responsibility, and I find I have no interest in being anywhere else.
He said it without looking at her, which was the only reason she believed it fully. Sometime near 3 in the morning, the pain crested again, bad enough that she pressed her knuckles to her mouth and could not speak for a moment. He moved closer without being asked, held her hand without making anything of it. When it passed, she opened her eyes.
The child is strong. Our child will be all right.
He said it quietly, as if he had not quite noticed the word he used. She had. She held onto it like the hand that held hers, without asking what it meant, without asking anything at all. The child did not come that night. The pain began to ease toward dawn, a warning only. The housekeeper said in the manner of a woman who had attended enough of these to know the difference. Eleanor slept at last in the chair closest to the fire, and when she woke in the gray morning light, her hand was still in his. He had not moved. There is a kind of trust that is not built in daylight and polite conversation. It is built in the small hours of a difficult night, when a person stays long past when they had every reason to leave. Eleanor had been talked at by kind men, managed by efficient men, and dismissed by careful men. She had not had one simply stay. She did not say anything when she saw he was still there. She did not need to. He looked up when he felt her wake.
You stayed.
Yes?
You didn't have to.
I know.
He released her hand quietly. Rose crossed the room and added coal to the fire, not because anyone asked, but because it was cold and she was still in the chair. That was when she understood that whatever she had thought this was, a debt, an obligation, a practical arrangement between two people with nothing else to do, it was no longer that. Had not been for some time. She was not sure whether to be frightened or grateful. She landed, for the moment, on both. He came back across the room, stood near her.
Tell me something true. Something you haven't told anyone.
It was an odd request from a man who measured his words so carefully. But then, 3 hours of a difficult night has a way of dissolving the usual distances. She considered it.
My marriage was arranged to save my family from ruin. I went into it knowing very little about Thomas and hoping the rest would follow. It did not. He was not a cruel man, but he was a dishonest one. And when he died, I discovered that the world has a very limited sympathy for a widow who cannot pretend she is grieving what she never truly had.
He was quiet for a moment.
And the child.
The child I want, whatever comes of the rest.
Something changed in his face, not dramatically, but the way a landscape changes when the cloud lifts and the light hits differently. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has spent a long time deciding what to admire and has just added one more thing to the list.
I have been in this house alone for 3 years. I told myself it was preference. I told myself I had made a reasonable peace with it.
And had you?
I had convinced myself, which is a different thing.
She looked at him steadily.
Why are you telling me this?
Because you told me something true and it seemed impolite not to return the favor.
She almost smiled. He almost let himself. The solicitor arrived the following morning, in person this time, which told the Duke everything before the man opened his mouth. They met in the study. Eleanor, who had been asked to rest and had done so for approximately 40 minutes, came downstairs in time to hear the end of it. The news was as bad as it could be without being worse. Vale had forged the Duke's signature on the second note. The original creditor had been located and was prepared to press the full claim. If he did, the estate could be contested, not taken outright, but tied in legal dispute long enough to make it uninhabitable for anyone without the resources to fight it through the courts. The solicitor said the Duke could contest the forgery, but proof would take weeks. The child, he noted carefully, might arrive before then. Eleanor, standing in the doorway, heard all of it.
Then take it. I will go.
No.
The room went still. The solicitor looked between them.
I will settle the account myself. Pay the creditor in full and pursue Vale's estate for whatever can be recovered. Draw up the papers.
The solicitor opened his mouth. The Duke's expression closed it again. He left. The room went quiet. Eleanor crossed it slowly and stood before him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her face, and the thing underneath the exhaustion, which was something he recognized because he had worn it himself for a considerable number of years.
You are paying a debt that is not yours.
Yes.
That could ruin you.
It will not. And even if it did, it would be considerably less expensive than the alternative.
Why?
He was quiet for a moment. The important answers, in this narrator's experience, always take a little longer.
Because Vale's lie cost you everything you had, and because I would rather pay a dishonest debt than watch your child come into the world with a siege lawyer at the front door.
She held his gaze. Then she said quietly, without rehearsal, the only fully honest thing left to say.
A few nights ago, when I was frightened, and you stayed, you said something. You said our child.
Yes.
Did you mean it?
He took her face in his hands, carefully, as if she were something of considerable value that had been badly managed by people who did not understand what they had.
I have spent 3 years making this house very comfortable to be alone in. I have been moderately successful, and then you arrived uninvited with 11 shillings and a sharp answer for everything, and I find I cannot remember with any precision why any of that felt like enough.
She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and covered his hands with her own.
I did not come here to fall in love with you. I want you to know that.
You came because you had nowhere else to go.
Yes?
And now?
She answered him in the way that needs no transcript. He kissed her carefully, the way a man does when he is being very deliberate about not making a mistake, and she let him, and when they stepped apart, the child moved, one sharp emphatic kick, and both of them laughed. Quietly, unexpectedly. In the way two people laugh when the worst is behind them and they are still standing. The papers were drawn up by the end of the week. The account was settled. The estate remained. The rain stopped on a Tuesday, and the lawns turned that silver green that only comes after a long storm, as if the ground itself has exhaled and decided to begin again. He proposed properly, as convention required, in the morning room, over tea, with the words in the correct order. She told him he was several days late with the question. He said he had been waiting until she was no longer in a position to leave. She said she had not been in a position to leave from the first night. He said he knew. She said, "You might have mentioned it sooner." He said, "I was working up to it." And that, more or less, was that. There are love stories that begin with certainty, two people who know from the first moment, and the rest is simply the path from knowing to arriving. This was not that kind. This was the kind that begins with a light burning in a window that should have been dark, and a letter full of someone else's lies, and two people who had each been failed by the world in different ways, meeting in the middle of a bad storm and deciding, without drama and without certainty, that they would not fail each other. That, in this narrator's humble opinion, is the better kind. Tell me something in the comments. Have you ever had someone show up for you at the worst possible moment? Or have you ever been the one who knocked on the wrong door and found exactly what you needed? Drop it below. I read everything.